want to end up finishing too late. So whoever is going to join late, they will just then join at their own time. Before we start, I need to just bring your attention to the fact that this will be recorded and posted on the IACD website. So anybody can access it. If you don't want to be a part of this, please keep your video off then. Don't comment in this chat during the session. And of course, if you want to rename yourself as participant, if you don't want your details to be visible. Yeah, so I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us once again on a Friday. I know this is very awkward. So thank you very much for your time. We will just have two presentations from family members, one from Nikki, who is the wife, and then we will have a recorded session from Shanae, who is a mother, followed by sessions by Marie and Tracy Nupin from the Pete's Bell. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Nikki. She's part of our SA Child family because she's married to our own Rebel Ninja Nick. So she is Nikki Ninja to us. He also serves on the executive. Donna. Donna is also going to be co-hosting the session today. So she will still settle all the questions that you either post in the chat group or chat, and then, or she also has the questions that some people have sent through with registration. So coming back to Nikki. Nikki is a South African swimming teacher by profession, and considers herself to be a mermaid by her own volition. She's given us. So she has a love for water and got married in 2021, like we said, to our Nikki the Ninja, who is living with a disability and has inspired her to pursue qualifications to teach swimming to individuals with both mental and physical disabilities. Her passions not only include water safety and sharing the joy of swimming, but also reading, coffee, and of course their dogs, along with the sound of rain. Her rule for life is very simple: treat everyone with kindness, especially those who don't return it. And of course, we're not in the pool. She'll probably be in line for getting her next tattoo. So without further ado, Nikki, I hand over to you.
Hi all, thank you so much for the introduction, Rashawn. Before I start, guys, I just want to apologize for not having my camera on. The Wi-Fi at work is a little bit wonky, so you're just gonna hear my voice for now. Another disclaimer that despite being married to a public speaker, I am by no means a professional or anything. Okay, so here goes. As mentioned, I am married to Nick Smith, or better known as the Rebel Ninja. And Nick has cerebral palsy, or CP, due to a car accident when he was 6 months old. He's got CP with, like, the terminology is CP with left hemiplegia. And in spousal terms, this means that his right side got the injury and the left side of his body shows visibly. So, so he says he walks around with a bit of a gangster limp and all of that jazz. Shame, my babe. Our story began in a rather unexpected way. We met through my mom, and I needed help with tutoring when I was in matric. And at the time, my mom suggested, well, there's a new teacher that joined the school. Well, why don't he ask you to assist you? Little did I know, guys, that teacher was Nick. But it wasn't until a year or two later, after I'd left school, that we started seeing each other. But I think everyone seemed to kind of figure it out before we did. It took us a bit of a time to realize, hey, I like you. But before we became official, Nick actually told me about his accident and what that meant for his life. He was upfront. He explained that he wasn't like the other guys and there were things that he might not be able to do. But honestly, as I said to him then, and I'll say now, I don't really notice his disability. I just see Nick. And from the start of our relationship, it's been built on openness and understanding. I've always felt comfortable asking questions about CP, and Nick, when he knew the answer, was always able to, give it to me or explain something to me. Even to this day, 13 years on, I still ask questions. I'll ask, can I squish this? Can I move this? And we test the waters there. The The one thing about Nick, though, as you know, with people with disability, they do have their like triggers or no-go zones. You know, like for Nick, he hates being called a slowpoke. You know, that's his absolute no-go zone. And I've always kept that in mind because I know he does everything he can to like not slow us down. Even if we're running late, I know he's doing what he can, you know, with the limited mobility he might have on his left side. And think of it, there are many moments that actually left us in stitches regarding, you know, his disability. One of the moments that really stuck with me, it was my brother's 21st. And we were playing indoor volleyball, and one of the guests actually approached me, and she was so concerned. And she asked me if I'd noticed that Nick wasn't losing his left arm. And she suggested maybe he's injured. So I thought, oh my gosh, Nick is injured. So I looked over and I saw he was fine. And I said, no, he's okay. Like, oh my gosh, I'm relieved he's okay. So then she almost whispered to me, like, do you think he might have a disability? And I had to stop myself from sarcastically saying, what? My boyfriend of 3 years? He's disabled? When was he going to tell me this? You know? But instead I just said, you know what? I'm aware of his condition, and I explained to her. So it was a moment like that that actually reminded me of how easily people may overlook a disability that's right in front of them, or anything that's right in front of them, and that Nick and I just roll with it. Like we're like puzzle pieces, you know, we naturally fill in the gaps for each other. But guys, I'd actually be lying if I said I'm not scared of what the future holds. Um, as with most disabilities, you know, as the person gets older, you know, it can progress and it gives new challenges and new spiciness to it. Every case is different, and you know, it would be comforting to have like a guideline, or as my phrase is, an adultier adult, you know, like, oh my gosh, this is happening. What do I do? You know, but I know that Nick and I will figure it out together. He doesn't know the answers, and I don't know the answers, but I know the two of us will definitely, you know, find out those answers together. On that note, of the more serious note of finding stuff out, there was a health scare that Nick actually had in 2020. And I remember the day clearly. It was 25th of March, 2020. You know, that the day just before we were supposed to go into that first COVID lockdown, if all of us remember that time. It was his younger sister, Amy's birthday. And after celebrating with the Mexican dinner, we'd come home and Nick had mentioned, no, his stomach didn't feel right. And we said, okay, well, shame, you know, you go and rest. And I continued playing Xbox, and we're actually fine. He came back about an hour later and he said, no, his stomach was really upset. And we couldn't figure out what it was. You know, we'd had the same food. I dished for him, same food, same portions. So we couldn't pinpoint anything, so we just left it. But then throughout the night, Nick got progressively worse. And this started becoming more than, you know, just food poisoning or something. This was something else. We were so worried that something had happened, you know, with his disability, with the shunt that he had and everything. He was throwing up and in severe pain. And in the almost 9 years at that time that we'd been together, I'd never seen him like this. And anyone who knows Nick knows how strong he is, knows how confident he is. And this man was in tears. He was blaming himself. He said he was so useless because of a disability. And he said, you know, just leave me. You know, you don't need this in your life. And I not once did I question looking after him. I said, you are my person. I'm with you. And at around 4 a.m. in the morning, sorry guys, I'm like shaking because just remembering it was so scary. At 4 a.m. in the morning, he'd mentioned no, his arms were tingling. And I said, no, right, that's done. I'm not going to wait until, you know, 7 o'clock. I'm taking you now. So off we went, and you know, what followed was so terrifying. And this is obviously the summarized version of it because I don't want to bore anyone with so many details, but I was told to wait at reception, you know, for my safety because they weren't sure on how COVID was going to react and everything. And Nick was in the back, and hours had passed. I heard no updates whatsoever. So I sat there, and eventually the receptionist for a neurosurgeon who was going to see Nick came through and explained very briefly that they might need to operate on either his head or his stomach, you know, to access his shunt, depending on what the x-ray showed. And they needed me to sign it as proxy. So, guys, I signed that form. I felt completely in the dark, and I was basically told to go home. There was nothing else they could do until the operation happened. But in the end, you know, Nick didn't even need the surgery. He was discharged 3 days later, and we learned that the pieces of shunt had actually touched his intestine as the food passed through. And it caused his body to have such a violent reaction to it. And we said, well, what can we do? You know, is it his disability? Is it shunt? What is it? And they gave us no guidance. They just said, well, we can't do anything. You just kind of have to wait for it to happen again before we can actually do anything for you. And guys, I will never forget that. That experience actually taught me so much about resilience, love and navigating life with someone who has a disability, because that was the first time I felt so out of my depth. I needed that adult-tier adult or that guideline, for me. It's not always easy, and the unknowns can be so scary. But I know that Nick and I have built a life together based on understanding, humor, and unconditional support. Part of that support is, and another big part of our story is actually Nick's younger sister, Amy, who I mentioned earlier. She is 5 years younger than Nick, and she was born with Down syndrome. So that he's physically disabled and she's mentally disabled. They have like the most amazing bond, guys, and they call themselves the arms and the brain. And from the start, Nick was very upfront about her importance in his life and the possibility that one day we might actually become her caregivers. I've not ever hesitated in this moment when I said, fine, she's my sister, she's coming in, all responsibilities and everything that comes with it. I will learn with Nick and with Amy as we go from this path. And because of the two of them, actually, as mentioned earlier, I've been inspired to actually start offering lessons, like swimming lessons, to people with disabilities. It's something I want to do as a labor of love, not for profit, because, let's face it, disability can be so expensive. And, who knows? I might even help discover the next Natalie du Toit. Let's go. But at the end of the day, guys, people with disabilities are just like the rest of us, just on a spicier path is what we call. You get easy level and you get like hard level. They chose the more expert level. Our journey was, as a couple, navigating life with Nick CP has been one, full of love, resilience, and learning, full of openness and humor. We tackle the challenges as they come and lean on each other every single step of the way, from the health scares to embracing possible responsibilities or just figuring out how to make life work. We always talk about patience and understanding and finding the humor even in the tough times. At the moment it's really serious, but always find the humor where you can, because as much as they're struggling, we all struggle in different ways. If I could offer any advice to any spouses or caregivers, it would be this: just be patient, ask those questions, and take things as they come. There's no handbook for this kind of life, and every situation is different. But staying curious and open can make all the difference. We need greater awareness, understanding, and support systems for families navigating life with CP or any disability, physical, non-physical, mental, visible, all of those. And it's not just about those with disabilities, but also our families, partners, and caregivers who need the resources, guidance, and communities to lean on. I believe together we can actually create a world, we challenge our mate with compassion, and love and resilience lead the way. Like I always say, ask that question, teach your kids, be compassionate, and ask. Nick, we're both teachers, we teach at the same school, and kids will ask me questions about Nick, and Nick will ask questions about me. And yeah, it's just, ask those questions and try and find the guidance and support for each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I know it's not always easy to talk about your experience, and I mean we noticed that you got so emotional just reliving some of the challenges that you had. But we want to commend you on your bravery. Also, let me just tell you that you say you're not an excellent speaker, but Nick must have been rubbing off on you, because that was excellent.
Who do you think gives him guidelines in the background?
Sorry?
Who do you think gives him some guidelines in the background when he gives a talk? I'll say smile or breathe or do this.
Okay,
He's
okay,
definitely the
excellent.
spotlight man, not me.
He's been there with you, even though he's not with you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the next person or the next presentation that we're going to watch is one that's done by Shanae Habelkhan, who is not only a physiotherapist, also considers herself an advocate for inclusivity and parent empowerment. She's a dedicated physiotherapist with 8 years of experience in both public and private health sector, and a special interest in pediatric rehabilitation and neurodevelopmental therapy. As a mother of a child with a disability, she brings a deeply personal perspective to her work, blending professional expertise with lived experience to support children and families navigating similar journeys. She's passionate about creating inclusive environments. Shanae advocates for holistic care approaches that empower parents and caregivers. She's committed to raising awareness about the unique challenges faced by families of children with disabilities, while championing solutions that enhance the quality of life and inspires other parents to embrace resilience and advocacy for their children. So this it's important that I also just say that I gave everybody carte blanche into how they wanted to do their presentation. And so Shanae's presentation is without her talking. And let me just share that with you. Right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
Okay.
it's
Fantastic.
beautiful.
There's no sound though.
Okay, let me just check. Is that better?
Upside down, it's hard to sleep at night. Don't you worry, 'cause everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. Through the long nights, in the bright lights, don't you worry. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. Through the long nights, in the bright lights, don't you worry. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. All alone and now, waiting for your phone call to come soon. For you, oh, I will walk 1,000 miles to be in arms for them. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. I'll always be there for you. I promise I'll stay right here. I know that you want me to, baby. We can be. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. In the bright lights, don't you know? Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. Through the long nights, in the bright lights, don't you worry. Everything's gonna be alright. The ocean across the sea, in the rain, over the mountain, across the sky, you see the in your eyes. The storm and through the clouds, ups and water. Upside down, it's hard to sleep at night. Don't you worry, 'cause everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. Through the long days and the bright nights, don't you worry. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. Through the long nights and the bright lights, don't you worry. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. All alone, waiting for your phone call to come soon. For you, I will walk 1,000 miles to be in arms. Oh, then my heart, everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. I'll always be there for you. I promise I'll just stay right here. But I know that you want me to, baby. We can make it through. Everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. On the way, in the right lines, don't you worry, 'cause everything's gonna be alright. Be alright. Through the long days, in the bright light, don't you worry, 'cause everything's gonna be alright. Try to start stopping. Smell the roses a little more often. Take a couple plans and drop it. Do just what I want. 'Cause all we got is right now. So let's slow time down. These are the good days. These are the good nights. Doing our best, living our best life. These are the ones that we'll look back and say, damn, what a damn good time. These are the moments, these are the memories, these are the summers. So let's don't let these hours and minutes and seconds go to waste. Yeah, these are the good ones. All we got is right now. So let's slow some time down. These are the good days, these are the good nights. Do it.
Thank you so much for that video. I'm sure I wasn't the only one that was deeply touched. And I'm definitely not the only one who maybe had a tear or two in their eyes watching this video. Thank you, Shona and Kaylee, for sharing your story. It was really heartwarming. And I'm sure lots of people have learned or can learn so much from you. And next up, we will have a talk by Pete Spell, a presentation by two Pete's. She's a registered music therapist that obviously living in Cape Town. She's a diverse private therapy practice and an NGO involvement, offers her extensive experience in working with complex trauma, psychiatry, and special needs, working with both adult and pediatric clients. She has a postgrad diploma in pediatric palliative care and has been part of the psychotherapy team at PedsPal, a specialist pediatric palliative care organization since 2021. Along with the privilege of direct client work. Marie enjoys collaborating with other practitioners in teaching, presenting, and advocating around palliative care, mental health, and psychotherapy services, and has presented on both local and international platforms. Besides enjoying family life with a husband and two very busy boys, she is a performing cellist and a music teacher, as well as a fitness enthusiast. Followed Marie's talk, we will hear from Dr. Tracy Newben, who is a pediatrician with a postgrad diploma in palliative medicine, also working with PedsPal. She has nearly a decade of experience in this field and is a strong advocate for the integration of the palliative care approach at all healthcare levels. As mentioned, she's part of the multidisciplinary team at PedsPal, which is a nonprofit organization caring for children with life-limiting and life-threatening health conditions. She also lectures at UCT, and she believes in the power of community, communication, and connection. Without further ado, Marie is waiting for her presentation. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you so much for the introduction and also for the stories and experiences that were shared before. I think those are I want to say that is what matters. Those are the stories that matters. I just want to find my presentation. Just want to make sure that you can see it.
We do see the presentation, Marie, but we also see the slides on the side.
I'm waiting for it to go to
cool.
Presentation view. There you go. Is that better?
That's perfect.
All right. So when speaking about nurturing the family unit, and I think specifically on this topic of who is caring for the family, and we've done that in such an incredible way already. But I want to continue to bring the family's perspective into the space before we speak about how we are going to care for them and what as healthcare practitioners we can actually do, because our families have such a specific lens that we need to consider when we are talking about planning and helping and supporting. And I would like to share some themes that came from a study specifically speaking about the lived experiences of mothers who cared for children who suffered severe brain injuries within underserved communities after they were discharged from hospital. And the first theme that emerged was parents speaking about the incredible personal burden of care, especially initially, this constant concern about children being injured or re-injured, worried about are there other people that are not trusting that other people can also look after their children efficiently, little time for self-care, daily struggles such as financial strain, lack of community resources was really prevalent. The second theme that also came out quite strongly is that essentially these parents are now caring for a different child that they had planned for or that they experienced before. And this necessitated such a change in, first of all, their parent, before we're speaking about coping, but just their parenting styles. And for many, they shared how this was such an incredible source of stress. For some, it was good changes that happened. but it also again resulted in less care for themselves because they were so focused on this parenthood adjustment. A lot of them also spoke about how their mothering responses had changed. Suddenly, they were in a position where they had to become such advocates for their children. They would often have to explain why their children behave like they do, why they look the way they do, either within the communities or to friends and to family. And then also managing different behaviors from their children, especially difficult, aggressive behaviors, that is, especially initially, and how challenging this was. The third theme that also came out was holding on to faith and holding on to hope. And this is where they were constantly, first of all, seeking answers to better understand the child's diagnosis or the child's condition. And interestingly, also often doubting, why is it important for us to even go to the doctors? Is this going to make any difference whatsoever? And at the same time, with all of this, trying to remain optimistic, hoping for a recovery, and also holding on to future hopes. And just in summary, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are such, and I think some of it came out in the previous talks, but in our context, in the families we serve, being aware of their lived experiences is so incredibly important. And when we talk about serving our families, this lens of family-centered care is important. I looked at this article, and even though it is specifically looking at within pediatrics when a child has acquired a brain injury, but I think it speaks to disability in general. And what are the principles of family-centered care? I want to focus a little bit on that. So firstly, we need to recognize that every single family is unique. Even if we've seen similar circumstances or similar diagnoses before, every family unit is different, and we need to approach them as such. Also, it focuses on the fact that the family unit is the most consistent thing in the child's life, and it needs input, it needs nurturing, it needs a focus. Also, even if not initially, but eventually, the caregivers will become the expert on their child's ability and needs. And we need to strengthen the voice of parents and of caregivers. We also know that better family functioning leads to caregivers feeling better equipped to take care of their child. And family-centered approach also emphasizes the role of the family in care planning, the implementation of care planning, and also the evaluation, and I want to say re-evaluation of care planning, which is also important. So this is about working with families instead of just doing things for them. An interdisciplinary approach, if you have access to that, is also very useful and a very good way of working with families because different voices and different skill sets speaks to the diverse needs within families. It's also a strength-based approach, so there's an emphasis on resilience and an emphasis on strength, and it recognizes opportunities for healing and growth and hope. And then collaborative goal setting is also so incredibly important. And I think in terms of care planning, I know Tracy will also speak more to this, but it is important to identify and negotiate goals of care with the family. And it's family input. They need input into creating meaningful goals, not goals that make sense for us as healthcare practitioners, but goals that make sense to the family where they are at that moment. We need to facilitate rapport with families when we work with them so that they can trust us and we can get to know each other well. Collaborative goal setting, it also increases a child and family's engagement and motivation to work along with us and to continue in this journey of care that you started. And I think most importantly, the point is also to enhance caregivers' sense of competency and their the sense that they can really do this. They can do this. Sometimes they don't know and they can ask the questions, but that they feel empowered. This is so important. And another important aspect is that collaborative goal setting and family focus, family-centered care, is a very important opportunity for children and family to take ownership of their own healthcare journey. This is an interesting resource that I found in preparing a previous talk that I want to share. And I think it's so practical, and again, built around this concept of family-centered, family-orientated care. The F words is that there's an article there, and with a bit of humor in. But if you type it, if you Google, you'll find various resources on this. It's called the F words. It's a biopsychosocial approach to disability and goal setting. It's a focus again on what the child can do, what their strengths are. Again, focusing on family as the main unit of support that we need to work with. And it supports child health, functional outcomes, and also focus on family empowerment and the family satisfaction with the goals and the care plan. So this is just a quick summary of it. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but the F words that they're focusing on is looking at function. So this is when we are planning goals and looking at goals for a child and a family. So it looks at function. We need to address function. It looks at family, fitness, fun, friends, and also most definitely looking at future, because they are becoming, even if a disability might stay the same, the life, they are still developing, the family is developing, things around them change, they are changing. So we need to look at future as well. This is an example of what it can look like. So if you would sit with a child and they're able to engage with these questions, or with a family and say, what, in terms of your function in your family, what does it mean to you? I like this question at the bottom where they ask family. So who do you consider your family? Who are the people in your life that are important to you? So it's just empowering them in their goal setting and in their care planning. And what are the implications for clinicians if we think about it in this way? So it's important that we work with families, that we work with the children themselves. We need to act as advocates all the time, and be really skilled. And I think this is so important in two-way communication, not just in sharing our opinion and sharing our views and sharing our skills, but really listening to what families need and what they are saying, and sometimes even to what they're not saying. Assessing families all the time. We cannot compile good care plans if we don't assess families, that individual family as a unit on their own. I think it's incredibly, definitely as a psychosocial professional, we see it all the time. It's so important to address and assess psychological challenges that families face. Create opportunity for partnership as much as we can, and partnership with families and community care workers, partnerships wherever we can. It's so important because that strengthens that network of support. Creating a space for the voice of the family to be properly heard, incredibly important. Prepare families for the future. We do need to think about future, and that's why reassessing is so important. Provide resource packs. This is such a practical one, but it's really important. It's for information. Sometimes it's even more practical than that, but it's important that families have the information that they need to understand what is happening, and for the child, what is happening in your body. And when things change as well, good coordination between hospital and community-based care. We see that often when families leave hospitals, a new level of distress is experienced because suddenly everything has changed. And who are my people? Who am I connected to now? And again, creating a mode of care that incorporates a long-term approach is also important. And then allowing access to support groups and networks. Again, this is speaking to reintegration into community, or just functioning as a family, functioning outside in the community, not just in hospital. It's so different, but creating networks of support. And again, opportunities for psychosocial support is so important. And I am going to end there and hand it over to Tracy.
Thanks so much, Marie. Hi, everybody. What a wonderful opportunity and what a wonderful group of people. Usually I'm quite nervous to speak in front of a group who I'm not familiar with, but this has just been so, it's been such a warm experience. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you to everyone for sharing so candidly. I've also got some slides prepared, so I'll also do some screen sharing. Let me just make this big. And just to say, like, I absolutely love the theme. I love the word like nurture, and that we're looking at genuine care for families in a practical way, and the idea that we're doing this active listening, not just hearing. Yeah, it's wonderful. Let me get a slideshow. Is my sound good and the screen okay?
All good, thank you.
Okay. So I know the message I got from Roshan was to speak about resources for families in South Africa, when it comes to who's caring for families who are supporting their children living with disabilities. And my knee-jerk reaction was, oh, I'm gonna have to maybe I'll use AI and look for a big list, and I can put up connections and phone numbers. And of course, that was the real biomedical doctor in me thinking I need to take over and hit the books. And I caught myself. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. And I hope at the end it's a bit more valuable. So I thought, well, what's the definition of a resource? And I think for most of us, when we talk about resources, we really think of it in terms of financial resources. We feel like, oh, if I just had a bigger budget, if we had more money, we could create more support for families. We could employ psychologists, and we could build all these lovely holistic hubs for children living with disabilities. We need more materials, more staff, and all these kind of ideas become a real, to be honest, especially post-COVID, and especially in these austerity measure times, they become a little bit of a pie in the sky and nice to have idea, and it can feel quite overwhelming and quite unrealistic. So when we think of resources in terms of these very material external things, I think we can feel a little bit like we're on the back foot. But if you have a bit of a deeper read, that there's another definition of resource, and that is an action or strategy which may be adopted in adverse circumstances. So that gets a little bit more interesting if we start thinking, okay, but strategies and actions often come from an internal place, an inside place. And I thought, well, we're looking at resources in South Africa. And again, if we think of resources in terms of materials and budgets and finances, we can see that South Africa, if you look at the big map of the world, there's something called the Gini coefficient, which measures inequality between people living in the same country. And if you have a look, very sadly, you'll see South Africa, there's extreme inequality. So if we're going to talk about families in South Africa, and we're going to look at resources, and we're going to speak about resources in terms of material things, being able to have your own physio who visits at home, being able to have a hydrotherapy pool down the road from you, being able to have an electric wheelchair, being able to have a school facilitator with you. These kind of things are wonderful, and we should always be advocating for more of those for our communities, but in realistic terms, like what we can do tomorrow to change the lived experiences of many families in our country who are looking after children with disabilities. That's not going to happen overnight. And because there is this extreme inequality, we're going to have to think a little bit more out the box when it comes to establishing resources that have a true impact on the lives of the children and their caregivers. Which brings me to the thing I'm very passionate about, and that is the palliative care approach. So I did reflect, I think in the world of advocates for people living with disabilities, I think there's been such passion and such fight to be recognized as, even or when you have a life and you're living a life with a disability, your purpose is enormous. Your value is just the same as an able-bodied person, and your rights should be exactly the same. So really, this advocacy for saying like it's about your abilities, and often the offset, if you are living with a disability, is remarkable other abilities that others don't have. And those will often be spiritual, psychological, non-verbal. So to really like recognize that then when someone comes in from the side using the P word, like palliative care, I can see how there must be a feeling. I'm too deeply in love with palliative care to see that, but there must be some sense of, wait a minute. Palliative care is for end of life care. It's for when somebody is dying. It is about morphine and it's about letting go. And is there really a big intersection between supporting families living with disabilities and palliative care? Can they really climb on the same advocacy bandwagon? Can they be good allies? And I really want to say yes, yes, yes. And if I could still do flick-flacks, I'd do flick-flacks. So I think the palliative care approach is the most underrated resource that we have at our disposal. So I just wanted to speak to a couple of the myths that we've come across at PedsPal. And this is not from families. This is often coming from doctors, nurses, caregivers themselves. It's from healthcare workers. So palliative care is not exclusively end-of-life care. We do pride ourselves on wanting to be present and to give dying children the best care possible. Yes, but it is really that proverbial tip of the iceberg. So it is not, the focus is not on end-of-life care. It is not just for dying children. I'll show you our new updated model of care, which very clearly says there is a big space for survivorship. Children who do go through, if I think, I'm going to give two examples. I'll think of Kaylee's journey now. I mean, Kaylee is living a wonderful life, but she has had a life that has needed a palliative care approach. There have been times, her mum shares very openly, times of immensely distressing spiritual, emotional, social suffering, which they have navigated. But a palliative care approach, really, it gives you such a good foundation, and it's such a sturdy approach to those kind of challenges. So yes, it's not just for dying children. Many children and families who benefit from palliative care, those children survive a long time. Some people think of palliative care very much as synonymous with hospice. So if you get referred to palliative care, you're getting referred to a physical place for end-of-life care. I think that comes from the adult world of palliative care, where hospice, I think, has got an enormously important and valuable role. But no, currently in South Africa, there are a handful of dedicated children's hospices. So really, it's not... the palliative care approach is not about getting a child or a family into a place. It's an internal approach. And then this idea that it is some kind of a luxury that's only available in these high income countries. We've got more important things in South Africa to focus our money on than or time or priority or policy development or posts. We've got more important things than or more pressing things than palliative care. So that's also just not true. And palliative care is not giving up. If you develop a palliative care approach, it's not because there's nothing left that you can do. It's because you are recognizing that when you're living with a condition that cannot be cured, it is not just it's not just a physical impact on one child's body. There is a spiritual, financial, social, psychological, emotional, and it doesn't just impact that child, it ripples into the families, into the community, and into the fiber of the culture and the country. So what is the pediatric palliative care approach if it isn't those other things? And I will let Matty speak to this, because I think he just sums up the essence of it really nicely. Firstly, I love his quote, they're both quotes, but the one that's in blue, where he said, "I'm told I'm a champion for hope and peace. I'm told I'm a champion for so many reasons, but I'm not a champion. I'm a messenger." And I just love that. I think it encapsulates like such purpose and such humility. And it also resonates with me from many moms who have told me at PedsPal, they are so tired of being told you're so strong, you're so amazing, I just couldn't do what you do. They just say, it's not something you choose, you do it out of a place of such love and responsibility, but you do not feel like a champion, like it's been something you've been rewarded with. It is something that really changes your life journey. And it's something that, yes, there are many gifts and many blessings and much resilience that goes with it. But I really think sometimes there's a touch of toxic positivity around it, where the mothers are made to feel like if you're not coping, or if you're vulnerable, or if you are exhausted, then you just haven't been a champion. And that's much easier for people to say to moms than actually providing a better support system for them. So again, that's my opinion, but I think Matty sums up that feeling very beautifully. And he says about pediatric palliative care, it is no longer about helping children to die well. It is helping them to live well. And I think that just echoes the sentiment of the community that is advocating for a good world that supports people living with disabilities. It is the same message that we are trying to share as well, that no matter what your healthcare condition, if it's not curable, it's about saying, how do we create a system that makes sure that the time that people do have is good time. And then the definition of pediatric palliative care. This is a definition from a parent advocacy group called Together for Short Lives. And I've just highlighted the words that I really, that I think are great. So palliative care for children is sorry, I'm in the way of the definition. It is an active and total approach to care from the point of diagnosis throughout the child's life, death, and beyond. And the focus really is not just on this physical being, but on the other domains that make us human, that give us our personhood. And the focus is to enhance the quality of life, and not just for the child, for the whole family. So how does this translate? So this all sounds quite abstract and everything, but how does this translate if we're going to say that in order to provide a family and healthcare providers with more resources to promote better care for the family and to nurture the child and the family, how does integrating the palliative care approach in a practical way, how does this change care? So first of all, what it asks of healthcare providers is to acknowledge the concept of total pain. So when you are looking after a child, or when you are approaching a symptom, we don't just ask about the physical symptoms. You ask, has the care dependency grant been sorted out? Do you have questions, or in the broader family, are there questions that have come up where you would like time to sit and speak them through, like talk through them? I see last time your husband was with you. Is there a reason he's not here today? Do you have travel plans to go back to? Maybe often we see families who are too shy to say, okay, actually they're going to be going back to the Eastern Cape for Christmas for 2 months. And they think, oh, is that now irresponsible? Will it be perceived as irresponsible? They don't say anything, and then they run out of medication. And that's because there isn't that trust and that holistic approach. It also asks of healthcare workers to not see communication with families as a nice to have. It's a core competency. If you have to speak to a parent about life-changing news, you need to learn how to do it in a compassionate way, and in a way that there's an actual, it's been studied about how do you share news in a way that is manageable, that is respectful, that is, I mean, you can't take trauma out of it all the time, but in a way where the family does not feel abandoned or isolated or panicked afterwards. It also asks healthcare workers to take the value system and the family's context into consideration when you're doing your shared decision-making and your shared goal setting, and to speak amongst yourselves. It can't be that you tell the family, okay, I'm just the neurologist, so I'm going to speak to you about the shunt. If you would like to know about seizure control, then you must go speak to someone at this place. If you want to know, if you're feeling a bit depressed, you must go to this place. If you want to sort out your chair, you go to that place. No, it says that is really difficult for families. Getting shifted between different places, the cost of transport, it's really hard. Taking time off work, we need to actually collaborate in multidisciplinary team meetings or emails. We have to collaborate and develop holistic care plans alongside the family. And these care plans are not abstract things I'm talking about. We have a thing, it doesn't have to be, we call it a palliative care plan. It can also be a care plan for a child with a long-term health condition. But this is a family health document that details, these are the symptoms that this child has. This is the management they're on. If things go wrong, this is who you contact. So you really help with proper pathways of care, a consistent care team, good communication, and trusting the family to hold that information. And if they don't understand it, that's on the healthcare providers. That's on us for not having good, clear communication. So really creating much better partnerships, supporting the families a lot better in transitional care, because that's also a big gap, I think, in our system. Suddenly, you looked after as a child, you turn 18, your healthcare condition doesn't change, your diagnosis doesn't change. However, your entire care team, often both in state and private, suddenly changes. So being able to recognize that as a place where support is needed, and then and to know what resources exist. So now, as you're saying, if we have a palliative care approach, what we would be saying is that when we meet families, if the child has autism, or if the child has got cerebral palsy, or if the child has got Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, part of having a palliative care approach means that we build those resources to share with families. We know the contact number and the email address and what the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation of South Africa offers. We know what the Western Province CP Association offers, and we take time to build those connections, because that palliative care approach is teaching us as healthcare workers. That's what families are asking for. They are asking to know about the existing resources and to be directed to places that are trustworthy. And then, of course, for us to play a much bigger role in advocacy. And then I just wanted to point out my diagram there is the enhanced model of palliative care, which is really showing that this approach starts right at the beginning of diagnosis, continues throughout life, and whether you need grief support later on or you survive, we continue that relationship and that approach. Yeah, so sorry, that was a bit of a sudden ending, but that's my, let me start my share. That's my message, that I think one of the biggest resources we have in South Africa is actually a big wave of healthcare providers that are being exposed to the palliative care approach. And just to know that there are communities like your community that can be our allies in really advocating for this approach to be taught to social workers, to nurses, to caregivers, to doctors, and can be really taken seriously and become a core competency where this kind of total care is the norm, not the exception. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you to both Marie and Tracy. I think many of us have heard about PeteSpell, but we didn't really understand exactly what it is that you do, or the services that are offered. And I'm really glad that you outlined exactly what palliative care and PeteSpell is about, and it's not solely for end-of-life care, which is often an assumption that we all make. We now understand that palliative care is not only, starting of end of life, but should start when the family gets the diagnosis. And in fact, we had a webinar in August this year with Dr. Louisa Mudawarima. And this talk can also be accessed on the SA Child website if you are interested in more about this. I'm pleased to say that we've been joined by Gaila Kilgore, who is representing the IAACD. Welcome, Gaila. So glad that you could join us. So if there's anybody, if there's anybody who also has questions about the IAACD, you can also be adding this in the chat room, or you can unmute yourself. Unfortunately, Nikki had to go. she only had that hour. She needs to go back to her aftercare duties. So if anybody has questions, unfortunately, she won't be able to answer it, but I will hand over to Donna. She will handle all questions that we've had from registration and whatever there is in the chat. Thank you, Donna.
Great. Thanks, Tushan. Thanks to all the speakers for a really informative chat this afternoon. And then just to echo then what Tushan's already mentioned, that it's been really informative. Even as a clinician, I have much better idea of what palliative care entails. So we've had a few questions come through with those that have registered for today's webinar. And just because of time, we maybe won't be able to get through everything, but just for Marie and Tracy, seeing that Nikki had to leave, one of the questions that came through was how can we support families with special needs a bit better? And then they highlighted specifically child-leaded families, and then also families that maybe have cognitive impairment.
Maria, are you happy for me to?
Yes.
Can I go? Do you know what I think is really important? I mean, that's a very broad question, but one of the biggest barriers to good holistic care that I've seen in a lot of our South African setting is the high turnover. Like you have interns and comserves and busy units in many parts of the country. And a really big challenge is the inconsistent caregiver, that each time these kind of families meet, because this is going to be a family that's going to have many contact points with the healthcare system over many years. So my suggestion would be to really identify wherever their primary place of care is, would be to identify a consistent caregiver that takes on that family almost like a case manager. And that person I would recommend would be somebody with some kind of a with the understanding of total care and chronic care. So that would be my starting point, to make sure that these because often the big folders or the thick folders get shunted to the juniors or get avoided in a busy space. And really, so two things I would say: identifying a consistent caregiver in the system who's got experience and understanding of total pain. I think that would be important. And oh, but the second one's just gone for me. It'll come just now. Yeah, but yeah, that would be my piece of advice. I don't know what you would like to add, Marine.
I don't have anything to add. I'm just reading some of the comments on the side. Yeah. But I do think.
Oh, so I've just remembered my second thing. Sorry.
No,
so the first thing is that. My second thing is acknowledging that you need in-house training for these kind of patients. So I would say reach out to these NGOs such as yourselves, like us, get us into your CMEs, into your in-service training. Most NGOs involved in these fields are very keen to go out and advocate and do work. So upskill your staff in those settings. So I think the idea of a identified, consistent caregiver with understanding of total pain and chronic care, and upskill people in your departments in the palliative care approach or caring for children with long-term health conditions.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Is there anything you'd like to add, Marie? Okay, and then also just leading on from that, if you could maybe just touch on the importance of respite care, just for families, and seeing that the topic is around nurturing the family. You mentioned, families feeling guilty about maybe going to the Eastern Cape over the holidays and things. If you can just touch on the importance of respite care, please.
I've got two quick comments. The one is my personal experience is often healthcare professionals and other family members will encourage the mom where there's opportunity to leave their child at places that offer respite care. My experience is that most of the mothers don't enjoy that. They feel they're abandoning their child. They worry about their child a lot. And I often think it's a quick fix idea. Sometimes it works, and we've got like Access to St. Joseph's, and that respite is amazing. But to me, it would be much more important to build sustainable plans into their life. Identify a family member or a friend who will take every second Saturday morning from 9 until 12. Identify, is there a day center where the child can go for day things? Is there a plan where one weekend a month the child goes to a different family? Something that is sustain. And I think to work on, so that's my one point, look for something sustainable, not a quick fix like 2 weeks every 2 years where they separated, you know. And my second comment there would be to work on giving the mom permission that she's allowed to have other things going on. It doesn't make her a bad mom. It doesn't mean that she's abandoning her child. She's not dropping the ball. That really validating those feelings, like, oh, don't be silly, a nurse is looking after them, what can go wrong? That doesn't help a mom feel better. You need to validate,
No.
this is hard. This is usually your full-time job, and suddenly your life is going to feel like you like at loose ends a bit. Like, validate those and then go into the importance of, but part of nurturing yourself and filling yourself up is having other parts of you that isn't just mom. Yeah, so those are my two thoughts, Marie.
I think also in the case of maybe an accident that had happened, even in Kaylee's situation, you know, parents often carry a lot of guilt and blame themselves, and respite care in that way maybe almost maybe may seem as them not taking responsibility for their child. So I think those are important things that you've highlighted. Thanks, Tracy. There were some questions relating specifically to swimming programs being set up in special needs schools, but I think we can pass it on to Nikki. I'm not sure if there's anything else in the chat.
I'm sorry, while you're looking in the chat, if I can just let everybody know that I am sharing my screen here. And so this is a webinar that will be happening on the upcoming International Day of Persons with Disabilities, so on the 3rd of December, as you can see. And it's held by the International Cerebral Palsy Society as well as the World Health Organization, because I wanted to shine a light on the challenges facing adolescents with cerebral palsy and celebrate the achievements. So they'll hear testimonies from teenagers with CP from around the world and just bring together a panel of the top researchers in the field and young leaders. So I think it's very valid, and it's just something that should be highlighted everywhere, you know, that adolescents have their own voice and that you need to listen to what they have to say. So this is happening on the 3rd. You can just Google CP International Organization. Yeah. If you are interested. Thank you.
Rishan, just from the chat, it looks like we've covered everything. A few people needed to log off because of time, but I think we've covered all the main questions that were sent through.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you, everybody. And thank you, Donna, for doing the questions. I know we've run over time, but I think it was well worth it. We do want to say thank you again to our speakers for very interesting and, you know, sharing everything that all your experiences. A special thank you there to Shana and Kaylee, who are putting on the screen. Thank you so much. But yeah, you can see that in the chat group, everybody is saying that they really enjoyed it. They were powerful messages, and I'm sure that everybody will go home with taking a lot, taking with them a lot of the messages that you've, yeah, that came through in your presentations. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.